Welcome, everyone, to Authors on the Air. I'm your host, Pam Stack. I'm also a cat wrangler and a book junkie. I am thrilled to be here tonight with someone who just feels like a friend forever. We've been talking for so long. Brian Cuban is my guest. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Hey, how are you, Pam?
I'm well. And he's here to talk about his new book called The Ambulance Chaser. It is Brian's first work of fiction, although he's written several other books before. But let me tell you a little bit about who Brian is. Brian is an attorney. He's an author. He's a motivational speaker. His life story is quite interesting. He is the younger brother of entrepreneur Mark Cuban, who most of you know from either is it Shark Tank, Brian?
Shark Tank, yes.
Yeah, I don't have a television, so I don't know that. Shark Tank and the Dallas Mavericks. And they're very, very close, which is lovely. I'm very thrilled for that. They are very good friends. But Brian had body dysmorphic problems when he was younger. He turned to alcohol and drugs. He was bulimic. And so he finally turned himself over to recovery and has made it his life's work to discuss what happens when all these overlapping issues, from bullying to drinking to drugs to bulimia to all of these other issues, come into play. He's now recovered so well and has done such a remarkable job that he is a very in-demand speaker around the country. He goes everywhere to talk about his story. Now, you've got a couple books out already, and we're going to talk about those, right, Brian? And then we're going to talk about where Brian came from addiction to fiction, The Ambulance Chaser. Welcome to the show, Brian Cuban.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you.
I'm thrilled that you're here with me. I have been looking forward to this interview for, I don't know, we've been talking for months now, haven't we?
So have I.
I want to start from the beginning. Tell me about growing up. What was your life like as a kid?
Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, PA, born and raised, the middle of three boys. Mark is the oldest, and I have a younger brother, Jeff, and we were baby boomers. Back when cell phones were two cups attached to a string, right?
Right.
And social networking was playing kickball,
right,
on the basketball court. So those days before the internet, and we were very different. Mark, Jeff, and I are very different. Mark was, even as a teenager, outgoing, entrepreneurial, and I remember our local newspapers went on strike in Pittsburgh, and he and his buddies, barely old enough to drive, drove out to Cleveland, which is about 200 miles away, bought their newspapers. The Cleveland Plain Dealer drove them back to Pittsburgh and sold them on a street corner in downtown Pittsburgh for twice what they paid for them.
Oh my gosh!
So he knew how to see need, even as a teen, a young teen. He was blowing and going, right. But and then my younger brother Jeff was a nationally ranked wrestler in high school, a jock, and the prom, the beer parties, and the dates, the girls. And I was classic middle child syndrome, and I was shy, I was withdrawn, I tended towards isolation, and I kind of internalized anything negative said about me. I was a heavy kid trending towards obese, and wore it as who I was, like a skin-tight suit, Pam. And unfortunately, I had a difficult relationship with my mom, and I'll tell you a little bit about this. But I want to make it clear to your listeners and your watchers that I don't blame my mother for anything I went through. Parents don't cause addiction. Parents don't cause eating disorders. There's a difference between cause and correlation.
Yes, there is.
And so we know correlation is it can happen to some people, because things happen at home, but won't happen to others, right?
Right.
And so there was a lot of fat shaming in my house. I used to come home and I used to love Chef Boyardee ravioli and SpaghettiOs. Do you remember those?
Who didn't love them? You could eat them out of the can. You didn't even have to.
And that's exactly what I did. Beefaroni. I'd come home, and this is before electric can openers. You get the old can opener, and you go,
I still have one.
We didn't have a microwave. You stick the spoon in, eat it out of the can.
Right.
And my mom would come home, and she sold real estate. And she'd come home and walk into the kitchen and say, Brian, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig. Now, these were the things her mother said to her. These were the things my great-grandmother said to my grandmother. I come from it's very fat shaming is often handed down generationally.
Yes.
And I came from an Eastern European Jewish family, the old country, the stereotypical Jewish grandmother, food, right?
Right.
And my mother had a very verbally and mentally abusive relationship with her mom, who was bipolar, according to my mom. And So she was going through her own stuff and her own mental health issues. And this was at a time in the 70s when a young mother talking about any kind of mental health issues, you could be put in an asylum.
Of course.
So
and
you
your
didn't
children
talk-
taken away.
Yeah. And so you didn't talk about it.
Right.
But not under, so, and it ran downhill. I don't blame my mom for that. We have a very good relationship. But not understanding those things, I began to eat more Chef Boyardee ravioli and more Chef Boyardee ravioli. And I became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian. Then the bullying really got going in school. And there's a funny story around that, Pam. I call it the day of the gold pants. It's not funny probably to the people watching, but an interesting story. My brother
I read
Mark,
this story. I read this story on your blog. It was numbing, mind numbing for that.
And my brother Mark had, it was during the disco era, Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta, and he was very into that. And he had this pair of shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants that he gave to me. I know, but this was the mid-70s. And
I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if he's watching this on his Twitter feed or something, and I'm thinking he's going to kill you.
yeah. But he knows. He loved his disco back then. He was going to the clubs.
We all did.
Yeah. I was a little young for it, but Mark was into it big time. But I love Saturday Night Fever. So he gave me these pants, but they fit Mark okay. I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle to get in them. My butt looked like 15 cats trying to get out, use the shoehorn. But I didn't care because I love my brother. He gave me these pants, and I wore them to school, and the kids made fun of me, a fat pig, and this and that. And I developed a very self-deprecating sense of humor, Pam. So the kids wouldn't know how much it hurt me. I became the sad clown.
Right.
Just, I know I'm headed to Sears to get a bra for my man boobs, and I laugh about it.
Right.
But in my mind, these were the popular kids. These were the, all the kids getting their first date, going to the football games, get their first kiss, all the things I wanted so badly, but just felt that no girl could ever be interested in me. But I felt if I hung around these popular kids, it would kind of rub off, and it would be like a fraternity hazing. And one day they'd say, "You're one of us," right? But that's not how bullying works. It all culminated. I was walking home with these kids wearing my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants, and they're making fun of me, and I'm laughing it off, and they start pulling at them. And before I know it, they had physically assaulted me. They had tore them off down to my Fruit of the Loom tidy whities, my Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt, my Keds tennis shoes, and my tube socks with the 3 rings around them. You remember those?
Course, yes.
3 different color rings. And they went on like they had done. They threw them in the street, the shreds. They went on like they had done the funniest thing ever. I pecked my way out into the busy street, got them, covered up my tidy whities, and waddled home. People gawked as they drove by. Cars whizzing by. No one stopped. And I got home, and there was no one home. It was funeral quiet. And I tiptoed down the wooden stairs to our basement, but the stairs creaked. And with every creak, Pam, I thought the whole world knew my shame. I didn't know how to stand up to bullies, and my brothers knew, my parents knew, and the kids who did it knew, and all the girls at the school knew. And so I found a wastebasket, and I buried those shreds at the bottom of the wastebasket, hoping that it would bury my shame. But that's not how shame works. That's not how trauma works. And that incident was so traumatic in my life that I could go to that spot in Pittsburgh and show you where it happened. And that was kind of the beginning, the perfect storm of a very shy, withdrawn young man who was bullied, who had a difficult relationship with his mother. And it kind of all came together in this traumatic event for me to start looking at myself in the mirror and just seeing this fat pig, this monster who would never be loved, never get married, never have a girlfriend, and would always be unworthy of anything. And that was the beginning as a teenager.
It seems to me, that it's particularly hard when you're a young person and you get bullied because you're not fully developed. Even your brain's still not fully developed. You haven't lived enough to understand you don't need to be popular or anything like that. You really were in the perfect storm. You had a very entrepreneurial older brother that you looked up to, and then you had an athletic younger brother, and then this crazy relationship with your mom. So I can understand, and I recall kids who spiraled in that sense, people that I knew. And the thing is, Brian, at that time for us, we didn't know what it was called. It was not called bullying. They
No,
were just,
not in the 70s. No.
it wasn't called bullying. I mean, I graduated, I'm 67. I graduated high school in 72. I remember there were either the kids you didn't want to hang out with or the ones you did. And the bad kids were the ones that, smoked around the school grounds, the girls who slept around, and or you assumed. But
Yeah.
never would I ever think about something called bullying. Yeah, there were kids who were rough on other students, but I felt fearful to step in and say anything. I didn't want someone to hit me or push me. And I felt if I tried to stick up for someone, that's what would happen. Is that what happened to your friends? And is that what happened to you? Did you withdraw?
I did withdraw, and I really, I had one friend who was a good friend, and we were sort of the outcast. I was the outcast, right?
Right.
Where I was the what's the crazy red-haired guy? The movie. What was that? I was the Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh,
and kind of the outcast. And we hung out together, and we'd skip school, and we ended up smoking pot, and my buddy Phil and I ended up taking a Greyhound bus with $50 across the United States after I graduated high school, and just to Santa Monica Beach, where we hung out and drank and smoked pot. But he was my only friend. He was literally my only friend, and I was very withdrawn. And I went on to college to Penn State, and it all kind of, before I knew it and before it had a name, really, I was binging and purging. I had become bulimic. I didn't know what it was called. And then I was drinking. And guys do get eating disorders, people.
Oh, yeah.
And
just like they get breast cancer.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I became an alcoholic in college now we're going into the late 70s into 80s. And then I was able to do okay. And
you were a functioning alcoholic in school?
To the extent you can, yeah. I mean, again, I was a person who, you look at it, okay, all the kids are drinking, but I was drinking alone. I was definitely an alcoholic. I was drinking alone, and I was drinking in the alleys of Penn State with bottle liquor I'd buy at the state store, so I'd finish off a bottle before I'd even go into the bar alone.
Oh my gosh.
So I was definitely an alcoholic. And
did you know then that you had an alcohol problem?
No, I had no clue. It was survival. It was how I survived. Because without the alcohol, I was in pain. I was in pain, and I was lonely. And
did your family recognize any of this? You hid it very well.
Well, you have to remember, in the 70s, there wasn't much awareness as it was, and I was away at Penn State. I was 150 miles away at school.
Right.
Living in a dorm. And your other 17 and 18 years old and 19-year-olds, they don't, they're in their own lives. They're not recognized. They're drinking too.
They're drinking too, right?
So nobody's asking for help. There are no resources for help.
How did you get into law school? With you maintained grades well enough. You passed the LSAT. So how did that happen for you? And what happened in law school? Did anything change? Did you have any lifestyle changes, or did it only get worse?
That's a wonderful question. I never wanted to be a lawyer, ever.
Really?
I wanted to be a police officer. That would have worked out well with my cocaine issue, with my love of cocaine back then. Right. But that came later, though. But I wanted to be a cop, and I was sitting in. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting in the placement office at school, thumbing through police officer jobs. This is before computers. There are these little pamphlets.
Sure.
And there were two guys next to me who were from Pittsburgh, who I kind of knew, but I didn't know them from Pittsburgh. I knew them from school. And they're talking about taking the LSATs and talking about going to the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. So it just clicked in my head that not that I wanted to be a lawyer, be Clarence Darrow, emulate Atticus Finch, change the world. It clicked that law school is 3 years, and I can stay in school 3 more years and not have to show my true ugliness to anyone. I could binge and purge.
Wow.
I can drink. And I had also begun running excessively, exercise bulimia. And I can engage in these same behaviors that I did at Penn State and just survive moment to moment. Because these behaviors were like my line of security blanket. I owned them.
Sure.
I carried them with me everywhere. And I didn't want to have to share them with anyone. I didn't want to have to share it with the world so they can see see the ugly Brian, the monster Brian that everyone else saw in my mind. They didn't see that, right? But that's what I projected. So for those reasons only, I decided to go to law school.
That's amazing to me. So you graduate law school. Do you go into law practice?
Well, I graduated law school barely by the skin of my teeth. It didn't get any better. I was an alcoholic all through law school. Again, I was binging and purging. And in law school, it's not quite the same. You actually have to study. And I wasn't going to class. I was going to class drunk and hungover. And you can get away with it to some degree in college, but in law school, it doesn't work that way. And I graduated by the skin of my teeth. But I did graduate, and I moved to Dallas, Texas. I picked up with a duffel bag and $100 to my name. And I took a Greyhound bus to Dallas, Texas, where Mark and Jeff, where I am now, where both my brothers lived, Labor Day 1986. Mark met me at the bus station. I moved in with him. And I hadn't passed the Texas bar and trying to find work. And it was like throwing gasoline on a fire, Pam, because they didn't know my problems, Mark and Jeff, and I wasn't going to tell them. They're out drinking.
You felt another failure, and so it's snowballing by this time.
Well,
and it's really getting some steam going.
Yeah, it was just more. It was just rinse, wash, repeat.
Right.
Because they're young, they're dating, they're out at the bar, so I fit right in. And then in the summer of 1987, in a bathroom of a nightclub in Dallas, Texas, a bar, I discovered the one thing that for the first time in my life allowed me to look in the mirror. And I started my journey as Jason Feldman of the Ambulance Chaser. I discovered cocaine. And for the first time in my life, at least for the moments of those highs, I looked in the mirror and loved myself.
Wow.
And that was, now I'm in my 20s, and I'd never loved myself ever, except when I was snorting cocaine. And so that began my journey of cocaine and alcohol took over my life. As a practicing lawyer, I went into personal injury law, and I was a borderline to often blatantly unethical lawyer in how I got my cases. And I know your watchers are going to be, does this guy still have his license? Yeah, but it wasn't for a lack of trying to lose it. And I say that tongue in cheek, but there are a lot of lawyers struggling, and they do lose their license.
As there are doctors, by the way.
Yeah,
so,
they lose their careers, they lose their family, and that all happened to me. 3 divorces, 2 trips to a psychiatric hospital. I decided to end my life by suicide in 2005, the summer of 2005. And at the urging of a friend, my brothers came into my house, and I had a .45 automatic on my nightstand, and there was cocaine and everywhere. And that wasn't even my quote unquote rock bottom, because I wouldn't find recovery for another year and a half. About.
Good grief! How did you find recovery, Brian?
Easter weekend, I had begun dating a girl. Her name is Amanda, and she moved in with me. And she didn't do drugs, and a very light drinker. But I had a JD in law, but a PhD in camouflaging my behaviors.
Sure.
And she moved in with me, and it was Easter weekend 2007. She went away for the weekend. I went out. Next thing I know, Pam, it's 2 days later. I'm in bed. She's looking down at me. There's cocaine sprawled out on my dresser, lined out. There's alcohol bottles. And she didn't know anything about my problems. She's probably trying to figure out if she walked in the right house. I'm trying to get my bearings. 2 days had passed. I blacked out. I had a blackout. And trying to figure out first what day it is and what time, and what lie I can tell to explain this law and order orgy of evidence, Law and Order episode, that I might not be the person I represented myself to be. And we ended up with our second trip back to the psychiatric hospital. And that is when I decided it was time to turn things around, because I'd be dead. And so that was Easter weekend 2007. Easter, and she stuck by me, by the way. She stood by me, and I found recovery, and we have now been married over 5 years and been together going on 16. So
I'm so glad to hear that.
Thanks.
So what motivated you to, first of all, be so open and honest about your own struggle that you write books about it, and you go on lectures, you go speak to charities and nonprofits and law practices and colleges? What brought you to where you are, Brian? Because that's a lot of stuff to be spilling out into the public forum, and and waiting for someone to hit back at you. Obviously, you've got your self-esteem, you have your confidence, you have your recovery, you work on it every day. How did you make that connect, the jump from recovering to let me go and tell my story?
It was really, there was no bright line. It was a progress. It was a process, right? I had written my first book, Shattered Image, which is more about body image and
Right.
eating disorders. And at that time, it got a lot of attention. It got a lot of attention because of my last name, and I'm a guy, right? So all of a sudden, colleges and different Rotary clubs and colleges and all these different people are asking me to come talk to them about the book.
Right.
And the book itself was self-published. It didn't do that well in terms of sales, right?
The cover for that book is really, really good. And if someone that wants to know a picture of what body dysmorphia is, to look at the cover of that book, that's the best definition I've ever seen.
Yes. And the artist is very proud of that cover.
That is it's an awesome cover.
And, and we talk about when people write books and they come to me and ask, I say, what do you want to be, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, when I wrote Shattered Image, because it was more of a recovery catharsis, because it was the first time I'd actually told these secrets, been shameful secrets. And what I learned was that there were so many guys and women and, however people gender identified, that were struggling with shame. Yes. And the shame was keeping them from just finding that one person who can help them. Taking that first step. And I've learned over the years that the biggest repressor of recovery is shame.
Yes.
And so, when I began to realize that, as I went out on the speaking circuit and learning the art of speaking, as I went, the art of public speaking, I realized that people would email and come up to me always after, right? And thank you. I thought I was the only one, especially guys with eating disorders and body image issue. I thought I was the only one. Now I feel like there is what? Hope.
Hope, absolutely.
So I realized that for just maybe one person, I can give them hope. And what I also realized that what I wanted to be when I grew up, because I knew because of the Shattered Image was never going to be a national, a New York Times bestseller. But what it became was my calling card to a lot of speaking engagements.
Right.
Who bought a lot of books and handed them out.
There you go. I like the symmetry of it. The cause, the effect, the redemption. Those are, I think, the best kind of stories. And I would invite you in a heartbeat to come and speak. I think you're a great speaker. I've watched a lot of your speeches on your YouTube page. You wrote another book called The Addicted Attorney, right?
The Addicted Lawyer, Tales of the Bars, Booze, Blow, and Redemption.
Right.
Those four words personify my life, right?
Well, so what? Well, they used to. Redemption
but who else do those four words personify?
Well, other people with the same condition. Yeah.
Jason Feldman.
There they go.
That's right.
So when we're going to talk about Ambulance Chaser in just one second, because really today is your book launch. Happy book birthday!
Yes,
today.
Thank you.
Yes.
The Addicted Lawyer was more. I mean, now I'm in recovery, and I was able to look back on my years as a lawyer and the people I interacted with. And I did some research, and I knew from my experience that lawyers have a very difficult time seeking help, because we are educational. I call it educationalized, my own word, there to take advantage of vulnerability, not allow ourselves to be vulnerable, right? It is viewed as a weakness even today. And so I decided there was a much needed space for this kind of book. And I did my research, and there was nothing. And so I decided to write The Addicted Lawyer, and I finished it up. The literary agent process was interesting in the proposal process, right? The query process.
Right.
I had a good proposal, and I had interest, but here was the problem. I had literary agent interest. Here was the problem. They all wanted me to change it. Why? Because it is not a pure memoir, right? It can't be categorized. It not only has my story, it has stories of other lawyers, it has tips. Because an agent couldn't put it into memoir or this
right.
Or
that,
I didn't want it.
Yeah, I understand. And that I blame on Amazon, by the way, because we didn't used to worry about, if you recall going into bookstores a long time ago, you went into fiction, nonfiction, cooking, and self-help. And that was it. So and unfortunately, that's just the way it is now.
Yeah, and I refused, and I said no. This is this is what it's going to be. And if that means I have to self-publish it or wherever, that's what's going to happen. But I was lucky to get connected with, and I know some people may not like them, but they've been wonderful to me. Post Hill Press.
They've been fabulous to us.
Yeah. And took it. They have other books besides what they started with.
Right.
And they took a chance on me, and the book ended up doing, niche well. It's probably sold now 4 years. It's sold probably close to 8,000 copies.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, and that's it. That's niche well, right?
Right.
And so it is very popular. It became very popular in legal circles, and things like that. So that is how I got with the publisher I'm at today. And that book, I have really been. I speak at law firms. I speak at recovery events. I speak at a lot of bar association events.
Right.
And what was interesting was, as I was finishing up The Addicted Lawyer, all of a sudden and she's wonderful. I love her book. She gave me a blurb too. Lisa Smith came out with The Girl Walks Out of a Bar.
Oh.
Right. And so I'm like, oh man. And so, but Lisa and I are wonderful friends. And
I love that.
Her book is wonderful. And then I'm not above pitching a good friend's book.
Oh, good. I love that. That's good.
A Girl Walks Out of a Bar is a wonderful memoir. So. But then the New York Times also wrote a piece about lawyers and addiction, and they mentioned my book. So all of a sudden, and then a national study came out, and all of a sudden it's just boom, boom, boom. And I didn't know any of this was going to happen.
The moon aligned with Mars on this, right?
Yes, everything aligned, and all of a sudden The Addicted Lawyer was on the radar.
I think it's great. I really do. I read blurbs from both of the books. I have not read them because, I was reading this one in preparation for our discussion anyway. But you now have 2 nonfiction books out there. You've spoken across the country and in Canada to all of these big groups. That's paying it forward in a big way, Brian, by the way. That's paying it forward. You've taken what was your own shame and your own humiliation, lack of confidence, and you've put yourself out in the open. And I have to congratulate you for doing that.
Well, thank you. And
when you speak at groups, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I've just
no.
I lost this question earlier, so I wanted to ask you again. When you're speaking to a big group, do you look at your audience and say, "Aha, I know, you know who you're talking to. You see that person who's got the same problem you had." Are you able to pick up those cues from people when you're speaking?
Well, we have to start with the premise that most people are coming to hear me speak. There are going to be people who are struggling. I know there are people struggling in the audience. That's why they're asking me to speak, right?
Right.
So that's going to be a large part of the demographic regardless. But anytime I speak, I'm always scanning the audience for reactions and see, because in my talk, people cry, they laugh,
sure,
and they cheer, right? So I take people through a wide range of emotions, which I want to be authentic because people know when you're not. And so, sure, I mean, I identify with the people in the audience, and I'm very passionate about what I talk about, and
good.
It's interesting because people always say, given your childhood and your shyness, how do you do that? Well, you put me in a nightclub, or I don't walk into nightclubs, but you put me in a social thing and I'll go to the wall, right?
Right.
I'm still that shy person in a social situation, but in speaking, I'm passionate and I'm not shy.
I do a lot of public speaking myself. And so that's why I ask you, I talk about domestic violence because I'm a survivor myself. So I look into the audience, and I can almost pick the people out of the audience who are my target audience, who are the targets of my discussion.
Yeah. I don't necessarily look for that. What I do is I look at the audience. I don't know what the beginning of my speech is until I look at the audience. Every talk is different.
You're an off the cuff speaker too, huh?
You have the same points you hit, right? And you change things up.
Right.
But I don't know what about 10% of my talk is going to be until I actually look in the eyes of the audience.
It's interesting.
And see who's there and make contact. I've changed up openings on the fly.
Yeah.
Just because I'll see something, I'll smell something, I'll hear something, I'll hear something as I'm walking up to the stage.
Right.
And so
you're keeping it in the moment too. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be authentic.
you've made a jump to fiction. And how interesting that The Ambulance Chaser should be the title of your book. Not. I mean, it just goes to show you were a personal injury lawyer. This is kind of an autobiographical piece of fiction. You've learned from your own experience and written it into this really twisty little tale. Tell us what made you decide to go to fiction.
How many times can you tell your own story in nonfiction, right? In memoir.
Well, that's true. That's true.
But
yeah.
It started with had a very dark genesis. Pam, I was having this reoccurring dream, and this was years ago. This reoccurring dream that took place in Pittsburgh, in the area I grew up, where my childhood best friend, and I are throwing bodies into a bonfire.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, and these bodies are burning, but their eyes are open. These 8-ball eyes staring at us. And then the dream fast forwards to Brian as an adult. And I have this awful feeling in my stomach that I'm going to be arrested for these bodies and for these murders. Okay. And then why haven't I been arrested? What's going on? And I wake up disoriented with this beach ball in my gut. Like, where are the cops? Are they coming? And confused. And so you try to figure out what dreams mean. And every time I would try to figure out what it meant. And I talk to my therapist about it. And I'm jogging, and I'm out for a jog, and I'm thinking about it. And it just hit me. There's characters, there's a plot, and the plot's not a new plot. Old bodies coming back to the present, right?
Right.
It's not a new thing. And so I think I may have a core, at least, of a story, of a fictional story. And now it went through many ideations after that.
I'm sure.
Of different things. But that was the genesis of The Ambulance Chaser.
Fabulous. Let's tell everybody, you get your elevator pitch and take as many floors as you need to tell the story. Because this is a work of fiction, even though you've drawn from your own experiences to tell.
Don't we all, right? Don't all fiction authors draw?
Probably other than like fantasy and science fiction. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
You write what you know.
Yeah, you write what you know. You write what you want to read too, I think.
The Ambulance Chaser is about a Pittsburgh lawyer, Jason Feldman, who finds himself accused of the murder of a high school classmate 30 years prior after her remains are discovered in a vacant lot. He is arrested and charged with her murder. He flees and becomes a fugitive from justice to find the one person who can prove his innocence and save the life of his abducted son.
It is a fascinating book. I have to tell you, for a debut fiction novelist, this book is very, very, very good. I had a fun time reading it. I read it on my Kindle because it's easier for me to read on a Kindle. I can change the font. But I'm glad I have this. I'm going to send you a book plate to sign so I can stick it in here. And
I'm hoping I can meet you and sign.
I hope you can too. I'd love to have you down here in Fort Myers to take you to all the bookstores around here. We've got a ton of them. And I'm thrilled that it worked out for you, that you've got this book down. Are you thinking, I know today's the launch day, but this book has been done for a while now. Have you thought of your next book?
Oh yeah, there's a sequel. The epilogue, right? The epilogue leaves many things open, and I don't want to give it away.
No, of course not.
But Jason by no means completes the hero's journey, right? And there are a lot of strings hanging, and that are fertile ground for a second book that I had actually already started, but stopped to market The Ambulance Chaser. But it's a fun read, and I don't think anyone. I mean, I think it's a fun read, and it's certainly not literary fiction, right?
No, it's a nice little book of suspense. It's a murder mystery, and it's very suspenseful. I give it 5 stars. So as soon as I can get up to Amazon, and I'll go there and punch in my little thing.
And that's how I want people. I was interviewed by the Pittsburgh Jewish the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle, and I read the interview this morning. He said it's kind of he did compare it to Grisham, which I think is nice. But whatever you think of John Grisham, I love some of his books.
Love him.
Yeah. I mean, for a while,
Scott Turow and David Baldacci, all those people, whom I know. Yeah. They're all terrific, and they're great writers. And listen, they all started off with a book just like this.
Yes,
just like this.
So it's just a fun, fast read. And is it something that I think somebody will remember 6 months later, other than it was a fun, fast read? No, no.
Well,
It's not meant for that.
yeah, when your next book comes out, then they'll remember that they read
That's
this
right.
and they'll
That's
say,
right.
I want to go ahead and read that. So, you've got to be producing every 6 months now, Brian. That's just
That's
all
right. And when I start talking about my second book, that's when they'll go back and say, "Man, I really loved this first book."
There you
And it was
go.
and I want them to say it was a lot of fun.
That's right. I have taken you for an awful long time, but I've just been so looking forward to talking to you. Do you mind if we take a few more minutes and talk a little bit more?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I love this.
I want you to think back before you wrote your first book and think now about this first fiction book. Has writing changed you personally in any way?
Absolutely, it's part of my identity. If I went into recovery April 8th, 2007, on April 7th, 2007, or even April 8th, or for the year after that, if you would have said to me, Brian, you're going to have 3 books, you're going to do one of them's an Amazon bestseller, The Addicted Lawyer, and you're going to have a great launch, which it's been, a great launch.
It has been a great launch.
Yeah, and for your first thriller, slap me anytime I say thriller novel, right?
No, that's okay. You can say thriller novel. It's fine.
It's for your, of course it's fiction, but I would have said, you're out of mind. I just want another line of blow.
Right.
And because that's all I saw in front of me. So yeah, writing is part of my identity. It's what I do. It's what I love. It is. I'm always writing. Even when I'm not writing, I'm writing in my head.
Right.
I'm looking for, I use my 5 senses when I watch around. A sound, a smell. Okay, yeah, that's that. I can make that work. That leads to this. I read, I've stopped because I needed to market, but right. I read everything I can get my hands on from, I read not just legal thrillers, and not just crime fiction, whether it's Winslow. I love Winslow's books, or Balducci. Memory Man was great.
I'll send you one of Don Winslow's books. I have one. I'll put it in the mail to you. What I've sent you books already. I'm going to send you another one.
His Cartel series is very good. I read that, but and so I've read. I just reached out to every genre. Woman's book.
You got cozy books from me because they were the cat books, and I love that. Well, let me just explain. I'm not a bookseller, folks. I did a fundraiser for the Naples Shelter for Abused Women and Children, and in that, a couple hundred of my author friends signed books and sent them to me to sell. And Brian generously purchased 5 books. You also have a James Lee Burke book, and if you get through James Lee Burke, you're gonna love his other books. He is magnificent. He comes on my show every single year. I love him.
And I'm looking forward to reading it.
Oh, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. So, the other thing I want to know is, you identify now as a writer. You're also a public speaker, a motivational speaker, and it's wonderful. What is the highlight of your day now?
The highlight of my day is, well, it's kind of funny. Right now, it's dopamine rushes from when people tell me they're buying my book. But the highlight of my day is my time with my wife and my cats, and my getting to speak with my family. Those are the things. You get older, your priorities change, right?
Yes, they do.
Your priorities change, and the highlights of my day are different than they were 10 years ago. I'm looking forward to getting back into writing, to working on the sequel. And the highlights of my day are with family and my kitties. And that may sound boring, but that is
no. You're speaking to the cat woman here who has, I wrangle 4 cats. And I have a cat sitting business too. So I understand that. I understand it's a soft cushion to be sitting in if that's the best part of your day. What do your brothers think about your journey and where you are now?
They have been, they saved my life, Pam. That we are so close. They saved my life when I was trying to end it. It's that simple. And so they have been so supportive. We are very close. We live walking distance to each other here in Dallas.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, until my father passed away, he lived across the street from me. We're a very close family, something my father instilled. Interestingly, my dad was the middle of three boys like me.
Wow.
He fought in Okinawa in the Korean War, but they have been very supportive. Look on social media how Mark's been with his millions and millions of followers, has been doing everything he can.
I know. I tag him in everything too, because I, want him to know I'm doing my best for you.
I'm trying to get him to do a book talk for me, and we'll see if he does.
Oh, that'll be nice. That'll be nice. Yeah, well, you two can come on and talk about your separate journeys. I'm happy to have you both on.
If he would do that, I'd do it. One of the things about Mark is he's very he's protective of his family and us, but he's also very protective of his time, because
I'm sure he is.
Time is the prime asset, right?
Right. I listen. I understand that completely, and I am protective of my time as well. I understand that. If I came to you and said my family member or my best friend is suffering from bulimia or anorexia or alcoholism or drug addiction, what would you recommend for me to do?
I'd say you tell me how I can help you. Okay. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me where I'll meet. I call it meeting people where they are. Tell me what your current situation is, so we can figure out what you expect to see in 3 months and 6 months, what you'd like to see. And so then I can be your wingman to find you the right path to resources to help.
So I often say this when I'm speaking to people, women who are survivors of domestic violence. I'd say, here's a whole big menu. You can go take one of everything, or you can pick a la carte. Most people don't know those things. So when I published a book myself of short stories that benefited the shelter, we put all the resources in the back of it.
Sure.
But I don't know. I have a neighbor who said he was in recovery for drugs and alcohol, and he was a straight arrow about it. But I never asked him, what if our other neighbor was an addicted person? What do you say to someone that maybe you're not really close to, or someone you are close to? What do you say to start that conversation?
If you want, I noticed you're struggling, or that you might not be okay. You don't want to be accusatory or judgmental,
right?
But if you want to talk about it, I'm here to walk the walk.
There you go. There you go. It's always the best answer.
You can't make people do it. The old cliche. Unless they're a minor, right, where you can force them into treatment, which that's a whole nother story. But can't make people do what they don't want to do. And
this is true.
But absolutely. You can lay the road. You can pave the road for them.
You can also not be judgmental, and you can say, I'm here for you, and then mean it. Because I've heard a lot of people say, she's being in an abusive relationship, or he's drinking all the time, and he keeps saying he's going to get out of it. He never does. And so, and I'm tired of it, and I just can't put up with it anymore. And the fact of the matter is, we all are carrying our own little baggage around here.
And you know what I say to that? Have you considered Al-Anon? Let's talk about you taking care of you, right?
Right.
Okay. This is I understand, because you don't have control over what your spouse does, your boyfriend does.
Right.
You and thinking and wanting control can raise as many mental health issues, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Trying to control it. So the question becomes, how are you taking care of you? What resources are you giving yourself to create a positive mental health situation, and to understand that you can't control other people?
This is true.
As much as you want.
I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed our conversation. This is 3 times as long as I normally talk to someone, but you're so fascinating, and you have such an interesting story to tell. And we're friends, and I'm thrilled that you're here. You are my last official interview of the year before we do our awards, and I have been holding out, waiting and waiting for you to come on. What would you like to say as your final words before we sign off?
Before we sign off, on 2 fronts, I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. People ask me, I'm ready. I have a book in mind. I'm ready. I don't know what to do. And I say, here's the biggest problem already. Book. Don't you forget about book. Just start writing. Just start writing. Right. There are people that will help you make it a book. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
put your story down.
Just put your story down, especially memoir, because that's where I get all the time. Memoir. I don't think I'm competent to advise people on fiction yet, but on memoir, I say, look, how many photos do you have of your life? Pick out 10 photos starting from the earliest point in your life, whether maybe it's a baby photo, or when you become first your cognizant memories, right? And line them out. Write a short story around each photo
Each one.
chronologically.
Yeah.
You have the spine of a book, of
There
your
you go.
memoir, and
You've
you
got
take
your
it from there.
chapters. Yeah.
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 And so that's what I tell them. Just people overthink it. And from the other standpoint, if you are struggling, and I understand the shame, maybe you're writing to compensate for the struggle. There is help and there is hope. There is only one requirement for recovery, Pam, just one. And I ask this question. People say, "Well, I say, what is it? You got to want it. This and that. Be alive. Just stay alive."
That's right.
And stay alive, stay above ground. That is the only requirement for recovery. And reach out. Reach out. Don't project out the worst possible response, because it's hard. And I understand how scary it is, but take that first scary step, because the gifts of recovery are wonderful. And the gifts for me just have not been these 3 books. They've been renewed family relationships, a wonderful marriage, and so many different prongs.
I'm so glad for you. Brian Cuban, it has just been a joy to talk to you. Will you come back someday when you have your next book available?
You know I will, Pam.
Thank you so much for being with me. And folks, thanks for joining us for this extra long edition of Authors on the Air. I appreciate you all. I hope that your holidays are lovely and happy. And I want to say thank you, Mom and Dad. And thanks to my producer, Roman. And thanks to my friend, Brian Cuban. Have a good night. Happy holiday.